Hey, so today we're going to talk about another Bible interpretation. This one is from the book of Acts in the New Testament, specifically chapter 10. This one is kind of famous, I would say. It's known for a part where God says, hey, don't call anything unclean that I have cleansed, or something to that effect. So let's go through it, and I'll kind of talk about what I think it means, what it means to me, at least, after sitting with it for half a day and having read it multiple times. I think it's one of the more interesting chapters in the New Testament. So I'm excited to share it with you guys. Let's just start by reading it and kind of talking about it. Starting at verse 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man, one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa, and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodgeth with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants, a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. So let's go through what some of these words mean and what some of this is about so far. So this is up through verse 8. So we're talking about Caesarea here, which is an area in the south of Lebanon. Specifically, there's a man there named Cornelius. The name Cornelius means from a horn. If you think about corn as in cornucopia, that's the root there, so it's a horn. And he's a centurion, so that's basically a soldier. And apparently he's Italian, for what that's worth. This is someone who fears God with all his house, gives much alms to the people, and prayed to God always. So he's a soldier. Soldiers usually, they're the ones who execute on commands. They're the ones who apply the laws. And so if we think of this man Cornelius as essentially that, he's someone who acts out the internal states that maybe we assume. So he saw in a vision about the 9th hour of the day an angel that comes to him. So why the 9th hour of the day? If you were to read some of the New International Version or some of the new interpretations, they royally fuck up this line. Instead of the 9th hour, they say something like 3 p.m., which is very frustrating because obviously it has nothing to do with 3 p.m. It has to do with the Hebrew significance of the number 9. The best way to think about the significance of the number 9 here is to think about how a woman, when she's pregnant with a child, she's pregnant for 9 months. So 9 months, it represents completion. It represents the end of a gestational period. It represents the moment when something finally comes into the physical world after sort of being hidden and growing in secret for an extended period of time. So here, Cornelius, and what Cornelius represents, there was something in him that was building. There was a prayer that he had, a goal that he had that was building secretly until the 9th hour. And then at that moment, something bursts forth and he sees an angel. And so the angel says to him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. This is very, it's a somewhat difficult line. I mean, it seems kind of old Englishy. It seems kind of difficult to interpret it. I mean, thine alms, what are alms? I think it's worth mentioning that alms are generally considered like a symbol of beneficence, or kind of like having mercy, but specifically having mercy in that you're like giving gifts or something almost to the poor. So thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. The way that I interpret all of this is basically he's getting confirmation that all of the things that he's been blessing himself with internally, God has seen those and acknowledges them and is now going to manifest them. So God says, or the angel says here in verse 5, and now send men to Joppa and call for Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodgeth with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. So there are two Simons here. There's Simon Peter, Peter being the rock, Simon usually representing a sort of internal hearing, a hearing of the good news, whatever that good news might be internally. So there's this first Simon. There's also the second Simon, who apparently is a tanner. What's a tanner? So a tanner is someone who takes like skins, animal skins, and will dye them, make leather basically. But it's related to skinning an animal, which of course should be pretty apparent to anyone who's familiar with metaphors or allegories, that to skin an animal is really to expose the inner part of things. So this Simon the rock, really the foundation of how manifestation is done, he lodges beside someone, a Simon, who's a tanner, someone who reveals the internal state, someone who kind of unveils what is in our hearts and in our mind. And this house is by the seaside. The seaside is water. Water is always the subconscious mind, because thoughts and our inner world, our emotions, they flow, which is in opposition to the material world or the land, which is static and solid. So he's by the seaside, which is just another way of saying, look, he's by that place within you where the emotions, the thoughts all flow, sort of that dreamy state. And that's where Simon resides. So go there, find him, and he'll tell you what to do. So when the angel spoke to Cornelius, and when that angel left, Cornelius called two of his household servants, a devout soldier, actually two servants. It was three altogether, so it's two household servants and then a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. So the devout soldier waited on Cornelius continually. The devout soldier that does that, I would say there's really only this devout soldier, I believe, is very significant in the story. So if you think about who waits on us continually inside, there is a part of us that hears every thought we have, that feels every feeling that we have, that is our innermost sense of self or our awareness. So this is the devout soldier. And this devout soldier always acts out what we commanded, even when we're not consciously commanding, even when we're sort of just passively entertaining different ideas. Those ideas do ultimately manifest in the world, and this devout soldier is part of that process. That was maybe a bit vague, but I don't want to hang on that too long, because there are also these other two household servants. If we think of the household as our mind, And basically, the two servants, this one, I think there's two main ways you can hear it. You can think of the two servants as either your sort of your words and your feelings, or your thoughts and your feelings. I think that's probably the best way to do it. You could presumably say that, okay, the two are words and actions instead of words and feelings. The reason I don't like that is because you do actually have this devout soldier that makes a third here. And because Cornelius is a soldier, he's kind of already an actor in some sense. He's already the one who executes on things. And so to consider one of the two servants an actor in this regard, not in this regard, but just to consider them action, one of them to be action, to me that doesn't quite fit. So let's go with the idea that these two household servants are thoughts and feelings. So we have thoughts, feelings, and then the devout soldier who waits on our internal states continually, always churning them out, always externalizing our internal world. So they all go to Joppa. What is Joppa? Let's look that up real quick. I don't think Joppa is super significant, but just in case it is, I want to double check here. So to double check these things, again, I always use the Blue Letter Bible app on my phone. This gives you the Greek, it gives you the Hebrew, it gives you Strong's Concordance. So Strong's definition just says Joppa or Jaffo, it's a place in Palestine. I guess it means beautiful. So it doesn't, it just means beautiful. It's just a place in Palestine. Verse 9, on the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet, knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake to him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. So this is a dream that Peter has. As with all dreams in the Bible, is super, super significant, riddled with symbolism. So let's really see if we can unpack some of the deep, deep, rich meaning here. So these three servants, they go up to find Peter, and Peter is praying on his housetop about the 6th hour. So the housetop is a bit different from being inside the house. Earlier we talked about Cornelius, the soldier. He's in his house praying. He's inside his household. But Peter's on top of it, which means, he's obviously transcendent. Peter's representing here someone who's already enlightened, you could say, or the part of us that is transcendent, the part of us that actually transcends the mind, maybe pure awareness itself, for lack of a better word. But he's praying not at the 9th hour like Cornelius was. Remember, Cornelius, this was the 9th hour that he saw the angel. This is the 6th hour. So what is the 6th hour? To me, 6 in Hebrew, and not just to me, but this is a pretty well-known thing. 6 in Hebrew means hook. So it's kind of an and, it's a conjunction. It's the combination of two things. At the deepest level, those two things are the spirit and the flesh, or the material and the spiritual. So here, what we have is some kind of conjoining that's taking place as a result of this prayer, and the rest of the symbolism will tell us what exactly is being combined. So Peter becomes very hungry, and he would have eaten. But while they made ready, Peter falls into a trance. So when we go within ourselves, there are lots of desires we sometimes want to satisfy. One of those could be physical hunger, or hunger can be seen as just a metaphor for any type of desire. So we can think of this as Peter going inside, the higher part of ourselves going in to fulfill a certain desire we have. But it gets cut short. We would have eaten, but while we're beginning that process of fulfilling our desires internally with our imagination, it got interrupted. At least Peter's got interrupted here. And instead of fulfilling what desire he thought he was going in to fulfill, he sees heaven opened, and a certain vessel descends unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. So what is this great sheet? It's knit at the four corners. If you look at the Greek here, you see that the great sheet is made of linen. It's a great linen. Linen a lot of times represents the flesh, and being knit or being woven, that also represents the flesh. For example, when we're in our mother's womb for 9 months, a lot of times it's described in a poetic sense as us being stitched together or knit together. So this great sheet or this great linen is knit together at the four corners and let down to the earth. The four corners represent, I would say, you could say the four dimensions, really: length, width, height, and time. You could also just say, look, it's the world of sense experience. So what's happening here basically is spirit is being stitched together into material form. It's woven together into material form. And this material form, it makes up all of the beasts of the earth, the insects, the birds. So basically, what Peter is witnessing here is not just the process of one desire being fulfilled, but he's witnessing the process by which all the physical world is created, the way that all things that are made are made. All the beasts of the earth, the creeping things, the fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him and says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter says, "No, Lord, I've never eaten anything that is common or unclean." You see, there's a part of us here that is always transcendent, that can't be touched by the material world, that is still blameless and sinless and pure. And that part of us, it seems inappropriate for it to come down and engage in the pleasures of the material world. And so here, this part of us is saying, no, I'm not going to indulge in whatever the world has to offer, whether that be sex or food, or I don't know why I started with sex, but yeah, food in this case, right? Because we're talking about eating animals. But even other more, some would consider base desires, whatever those might be: money, sex, things like that, humor, I don't know. But here God seems to be giving this higher part of ourselves permission to play in the dirt, so to speak, play around in the mud and fulfill some of those indulgences. And so Peter initially resists. He says, look, I just want to contemplate the most ethereal of the ethereal things. But the voice spake unto him again a second time and said, "What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common or profane." It depends how you translate this one. But it was done 3 times to confirm it, and the vessel or that sheet was received back up into heaven. So that's we could really stop there, I guess, but Peter does eventually go back to talk to Cornelius, and he meets with Cornelius and some of his buddies, and kind of there's more that happens. I think I'm going to stop here, though. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. We'll talk more about that. I think this one has been long enough. Also, my computer was freezing, so okay, it's unfrozen now, but I don't know, I'm just not feeling like I want to go on further than that right now. This was this is a tricky saying, this whom God hath cleansed, or what God hath cleansed, call that not uncommon. It's tricky in a lot of ways because it can be misinterpreted so easily. In particular, I think it's tempting to hear it as though the Gentiles, people that are not Jews, are beasts. And that's not entirely clear yet, but as we go on, we'll see why a lot of people might hear it that way. That Peter, if you think of him as like a historical figure, saw Gentiles as essentially animals. This is, this is something that maybe still exists to some extent in certain circles. Gentiles or the Goyim are seen as somehow less than. But this verse, at the very least, even if you take that more literal interpretation of this this section, by the end of this chapter, it's clear that that is no longer the case, that all men are, in fact, equal in God's eyes. But I think that even then, you're still kind of missing maybe the more important point here, which is that the world in and of itself isn't unclean. The body, the flesh, the desires of the flesh aren't inherently evil or something. If God grants it to you, then it is your right to rule over it, or even more than that. We see God says it quite explicitly when he talks to Peter, and he says, let me find it exactly. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. Okay, so rise, Peter, kill and eat. So if we're to follow the allegory through to the end here and really believe that what's being discussed here isn't just the animals per se, but actually, sorry, my phone keeps going off. Not just animals, but the whole of the material world. Everything in the material world is ours for the taking. It's ours to enjoy. Is that a bit of a radical interpretation of this? Yeah, I'm without a doubt. But that is how I hear it, and hopefully that does become a bit more apparent in the next video, where we talk about when Peter actually meets Cornelius. So with that, we'll end it. I hope you got something out of this one, and I'll see you next time.